You think you've seen true cruelty? No, you haven't. Not until you hear about Mrs. Adio Silva, the billionaire's wife whose extravagant lifestyle was built on the suffering of others. But remember, what goes around always comes around, and her downfall was so dramatic, so utterly unforeseen. It will leave your mouth hanging open. You won't believe how her own choices carved the path to her shocking destruction. Have you ever met someone who seemed to have it all, yet carried an empty heart? Picture a woman living in a mansion so vast, you could walk for hours and never reach the end. Picture her closets filled with garments so costly, even the wealthiest in town could only dream of touching such fabrics. Yet, imagine that this same woman used all her fortune and influence not to uplift others, but to crush them beneath her heels. That woman was Mrs. Aja. Mrs. Ajak was no ordinary wealthy lady. She was the wife of Chief Bamadil Silva, one of the most powerful tycoons in the country. Their estate stood at the city's edge like a crown cast in gold. Towering gates, marble floors gleaming like still water, chandeliers shining brighter than the stars. From the outside, it looked like a palace where joy must surely thrive. But step inside, and you'd discover that not every palace knows peace. "Madam is coming. Madam is coming." The housemaids would whisper in hushed panic every morning, racing down the halls to ensure perfection. If a flower leaned the wrong way, if a spoon lacked enough shine, if a servant's shoes clicked too loudly against the tiles, Mrs. Ajak would notice, and her notice was never gentle. "Stupid girl. Do you think I pay you just to serve me filth on a plate? Clean it again," she barked one afternoon at Kem, the youngest maid. The poor girl trembled, holding back tears as she rushed to polish the cutlery. Her cruelty wasn't hidden, it was displayed, almost savored. If a driver opened the car door too slowly, she slapped him hard enough to slice his pride. If the gardener trimmed the hedges imperfectly, she berated him as though flowers were machines. Yet, in front of her rich companions, she wore a different mask. At high society luncheons, draped in diamonds, she laughed loud enough to command the room, her arrogance echoing like a queen who believed the entire world was hers. "Ah, joke, your style is unmatched," Madame Clara once gushed, admiring her new wardrobe. "You know me," Ajak smirked. "If it isn't the finest, it isn't for me. Unlike you, still stuck wearing last season's collection. I could never." The room erupted in laughter, but behind those smiles were uneasy glances. Even among the elite, Ajak's arrogance knew no limits. What made her truly dangerous was the shield she carried, her husband's influence. Chief Bamadil Silva was both feared and respected. His empire stretched across oil, shipping, and real estate. Politicians addressed him as chairman, and police officers greeted him with both hands. With such power backing her, Mrs. Ajak felt invincible. "Who dares challenge me?" she often boasted in private. "Even if I slapped someone in public, the police would salute me instead of arresting me." And disturbingly, she was often right. When she humiliated a boutique manager in front of customers, nothing came of it. When she fired a long-time driver without pay simply for sneezing near her, no one dared intervene. Each act of cruelty seemed small to outsiders. But to those she wronged, the wounds were deep. And here's the truth about wounds. They never vanish quietly. They whisper. They fester. And sometimes, they return as storms. No one knew this better than Mama Esther, the elderly cook who had served the Silva family long before they ever moved into their golden mansion. She had witnessed Ajo's transformation from a young bride into a woman hardened by wealth. One evening, as Mama Esther stirred a pot of soup, young Kem whispered, "Mama, why does Madam hate us so much? We obey her every word, yet she still screams." Mama Esther sighed deeply. "Child, it isn't hatred, it's emptiness. When a heart is hollow, it seeks power by controlling others. But mark my words, one day cruelty becomes the rope that ties its master's fate." The girl didn't fully understand, but soon she would. Meanwhile, Ajak's world spun in endless circles of parties, jewelry, and vanity. Every week brought another grand event, another display of wealth. She relished the envy in people's eyes, loved the way the poor bowed before her Rolls-Royce gliding past. But in her quiet moments, when the laughter faded and the mansion grew silent, she would stand before her mirror, diamonds glittering, but her eyes restless. She owned everything, yet it never felt enough. And perhaps that was her greatest curse: insatiability. Always hungering for more power, more control, more submission. Dear listeners, let me ask, have you ever known someone who mistreats others simply because they can? Someone who believes wealth grants them the right to humiliate? That was Mrs. Adejoke Silva. But what she could never predict was that each small act of cruelty was a seed. A seed that would one day bloom into a storm strong enough to rattle her golden palace. Because no matter how high a person builds their fortress, when the winds of reckoning blow, even the strongest walls can crumble. And so, while Mrs. Adejoke Silva danced across marble halls and laughed at her servants' tears, the universe was already scripting her downfall. The question was not if it would happen, but when. The mansion glittered on the outside, but shadows gathered within. The arrogant wife of a billionaire thought herself untouchable. Oh, how wrong she was. Cruelty is like a stone tossed into a river. At first it's just a splash. But the ripples widen, stretching farther than the thrower ever intended, until they circle back. And that's exactly what began in Mrs. Adejoke Silva's world. It started small, with yet another insult, another humiliation. One rainy Tuesday, she swept into the kitchen in her silk robe, dragging it along the floor. She wrinkled her nose at the steaming pot Mama Esther stirred. "What is this stench?" she snapped. Mama Esther replied softly, "Madam, it's your special fish pepper soup, just as you requested." Adejoke's eyes narrowed. "You dare question me about what I asked for? This soup reeks of poverty. Do you want my husband's friends to mock me because of your village cooking?" Before anyone could stop her, she seized the pot and, with a single heartless motion, emptied the soup into the zinc. Steam hissed upward, and Mama Esther's hands trembled as she stumbled back. "Start over, and this time make it fit for silver at the jet," she ordered before storming out of the kitchen. That day Mama Esther did not shed a tear, but her heart broke. She had given more than 20 years to that household, cooking, cleaning, raising their children. Yet in an instant, all her loyalty was discarded like trash. But here's the truth. Not all wounds bleed outside. Some bleed silently within. And in Mama Esther's heart, something shifted. She whispered under her breath, "God sees. God never sleeps. One day, this woman will harvest what she has sown." Another story began with Kemi, the young maid. She was only 19, working in the mansion to help her widowed mother. But to Madame Adejoke, she was never more than a servant. One evening, with guests filling the mansion, Kemi slipped and dropped a tray of wine glasses. The shatter echoed through the marble hall. Silence followed. All eyes turned. Then Mrs. Adejoke's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "Are you blind? Kemi, are you blind? Do you know how much these glasses cost? Idiot. This is not your father's compound, foolish girl." She didn't stop there. She slapped Kemi across the face in front of everyone. The young maid's cheek burned red, but her shame burned deeper. Guests gasped, some looked away. No one dared interfere. Except one man noticed. Chief Biddy Silva's new personal assistant, Mr. Cole. Quiet, fresh-faced, polite, always blending into the background. But that night, his eyes recorded everything. The way Kemi swallowed her tears, the way guests exchanged uneasy glances, and the way Madame laughed it off as nothing. Cole said nothing, but inside he thought, "This woman, her arrogance will destroy her one day." Then there was Bala the driver. For years he rose at 4 a.m., polishing the car until it gleamed, chauffeuring Madame like royalty. But one afternoon, when he took a longer route to avoid traffic, Adejoke exploded. "You are a useless, stupid man. Wasting my time as though your life is worth more than mine. Get out. Get out of my car." She fired him on the spot, abandoning him by the roadside. Bala pleaded, "Madam, I beg you. Please don't do this. I have children in school. It was a mistake, I was only avoiding traffic. Please, madam." But the tinted window slid shut, and the black Rolls-Royce sped away, leaving Bala in a cloud of dust. He stood there, fists clenched, chest heavy. Years of loyalty, rewarded with humiliation. One by one, the people she trampled carried silent scars. And though powerless, each of them whispered the same words in their hearts. One day, justice will speak. But here's the suspense, dear listener. Justice doesn't always arrive with drums. Sometimes it begins with a whisper, hidden in the cracks of daily life. Late one night, after another cruel dinner where a joka mocked her staff before her friends, Mama Esther sat alone in the servants' quarters, her Bible open on her lap. "Come," she called softly. The young maid obeyed, her eyes still swollen from tears. "My child," Mama Esther said gently, "remember this. When a tree grows too proud, it forgets the storm is stronger. Madame Silva thinks she is untouchable. But hear me, no one escapes the hand of life, Kemi." "But Mama," Kemi whispered, "will we ever see her punished? It feels like she always gets away with everything." Mama Esther's eyes glowed with calm resolve. "Watch, my child. Seeds have been planted, and seeds always grow." And indeed, those seeds were quietly sprouting. Cole, the assistant, began keeping a diary, each insult, every outburst, every act of cruelty. No one asked him to, but something in his spirit told him, one day, this record will matter. Bala, the driver, began speaking with journalists he knew from his village. "If only people knew how she treats us," he muttered, bitterness sharpening his words. And Kemi, though still afraid, began to dream of a day she would no longer bow in silence. To outsiders, the mansion still stood grand. Chandeliers sparkled, cars gleamed. Mrs. Silva's power looked unshakable. But inside, cracks spread quietly. Because when a woman builds her empire on the tears of others, she isn't building a palace, she's digging a grave. The question was no longer if the storm would come, only when and how. And storms, before they break, bring silence. A silence so deep, the proud never noticed the shadows creeping toward them. Mrs. Ajoka Silva was about to learn this truth in the harshest way. It began with a gala, a glittering night in one of the city's most luxurious hotels. Gold draped every table. Guests shimmered in silk. Cameras flashed as reporters captured every moment. This was her night. A charity ball to prove she was not just wealthy, but generous. She floated into the hall in a gown like liquid diamonds. Cameras snapped. Women whispered. Men bowed. Then came the moment. She stood at the podium, smiling proudly. "My dear friends," she began. "Tonight we show that wealth is not only for luxury, but for uplifting the less privileged." Suddenly, the massive screen behind her flickered. The audience gasped. Instead of the charity logo, a video began to play. At first blurry, then clear. There she was, Mrs. Silva, slapping young Kemi in front of guests, her voice slicing through the hall. "Are you blind? This is not your father's compound." Whispers rippled through the crowd. "What is this? Is this real?" The video cut again, this time showing her screaming at Bala by the roadside. "You useless, stupid man! Get out of my car!" Then another clip, her dumping hot soup while Mama Esther stood helpless. Each scene darker than the last. "Turn it off. I said turn it off." Ajoka screamed, her voice trembling. "Security! Shut this nonsense down. Turn it off." The video continued to roll endlessly, unstoppable, until the final scene appeared, her laughing with friends, proudly declaring, "Even if I slap someone in public, the police would salute me rather than arrest me." The hall erupted in disbelief. Gasps filled the air. Some covered their mouths, while others quickly lifted their phones, recording the screen. In that instant, the carefully built empire of Madame Ajua Silva began to crumble. "Madam, please sit down. Sit down." Chief Bamaideli whispered sharply beside her, his jaw tight. But she refused, her voice rising. "This is nonsense. Lies, all of it, lies," she shouted, waving her diamond-studded hand angrily. Yet, deep within, fear churned in her stomach. She had no clue who had recorded these moments or how they surfaced. And that was the most terrifying part. Her enemy was invisible. By morning, the videos had spread like wildfire across social media. Hashtags exploded. Crew Bolagonia's wife. Justice for the servant. Who really is Ajua Silva? People filled the comments with their own stories. "I once served her in the boutique. She embarrassed me in front of customers. I know someone she refused to pay for months of labor. She thinks she's untouchable. Look at her now." Everywhere she turned, screens replayed her disgrace. At breakfast the next day, Ajua slammed her tablet onto the table. "This is sabotage. Someone is trying to destroy me. Someone is trying to destroy me." My God. Chief Bamidele sat like stone. His words cut coldly. And did you hand them the weapon? She froze. What do you mean? What weapon? I mean your actions, he replied calmly. You gave them the bullets. The world is only pulling the trigger. His words pierced deeper than any insult. For the first time in their marriage, his eyes no longer reflected fear or admiration. Only the look of a man staring at a stranger. And this was only the beginning. Her friends, the same women who once envied her wardrobe, now began to distance themselves. At the spa, Madame Clara whispered. Can you imagine Ajua? We thought she was refined. At the club, another friend sighed. Her downfall was long overdue. God never sleeps. The same society that once raised her high now turned their backs. The final blow came from her husband's business partners. One after another, calls came. Contracts were cancelled. Chief, one man said over the phone, we cannot have our company tied to this scandal. Investors are worried. Chief Bamidele's jaw tightened. His empire was trembling, not because of market shifts, but because of his wife's recklessness. That night, for the first time, he slept in another room. Ajua knew the storm had entered her home. Remember this. When people say the palace walls are strong, they forget that sometimes destruction begins from within. The wife of Crew Bolagonia had spent years crushing those beneath her. Now those very steps had left footprints. Footprints that led the whole world straight to her downfall. The mansion still towered, the chandeliers still glistened. But her grip on power slipped through her fingers like grains of sand. And this was only the start. Soon, those she had wronged would not whisper anymore. They would rise. The question was, when they did, would anyone stand by her? When pride builds a tower, humiliation tears it down. When a throne is built on cruelty, its fall will shake the earth. The world had watched the videos. The world had whispered. But whispers grew into thunder. It began with a letter. Early one morning, 2 police trucks pulled up at the Silva mansion gates. Sirens silent but authority sharp. The guards hesitated until an officer barked. By order of the commissioner, open these gates now. Inside, Ajua, still in her silk nightgown, froze at the sound of boots echoing through the grand living room. Madame Ajua Silva? An officer asked formally. Yes, she answered, startled but trying to appear calm. Do you know who I am? The officer's face didn't move. You are under investigation for multiple charges: abuse, assault, and labor mistreatment. You are required to follow us for questioning. The room stilled. The maids, the butlers, the gardeners, everyone stopped. For the first time in years, they saw their madam powerless. What foolishness is this? Ajua screamed. Bamidele. Bamidele. Tell them who I am. From the staircase, Chief Bamidele appeared, his face unreadable. Step by step, he descended, eyes heavy with disappointment. Officer, he said evenly, please do your job. Ajua spun around, stunned. What? You're letting them humiliate me? In my own home? His voice was cold as steel. No. You humiliated yourself. And this family. Now face the consequences. Her knees weakened. For the first time her shield, her husband's protection, was gone. The officers led her outside. Cameras flashed. Reporters shoved microphones. Mrs. Silva, do you have a response to the abuse allegations? Is it true you slapped a servant in public? Do you believe you are above the law? Her face twisted in fear. Lies. All lies. I will sue every one of you. But the cameras only zoomed closer. At the station, questioning dragged for hours. Mrs. Silva, is this you in the video? Did you pour hot soup into the sink while shouting at your cook? Did you dismiss your driver without pay? Her voice grew hoarse from denial. They're lying. Jealous of me. Do you even know who I am? But the officers remained unmoved. Times had changed. The internet had given the voiceless a weapon, and no amount of diamonds could bury the truth once it spread. Back at the mansion, the servants whispered. Did you see her face when they took her? Kemi asked softly. Mama Esther was right, Bala muttered. God does not sleep. But Mama Esther only sighed, her voice calm with both justice and sorrow. This is not our victory, children. This is life teaching its lesson. Let us watch what comes next. The fallout was swift and merciless. By week's end, Chief Bamideli's business partners were pulling out of deals. "Chief, we respect you," one chairman said, "but your wife's scandal is damaging investor confidence." Political allies withdrew too. "Chief, this matter is too hot. We cannot be associated with it." Even her children turned away. Calls went unanswered. The youngest whispered to his sister, "How could Mama do all these things? I don't even recognize her anymore." But the harshest cut came from the public. Social media exploded with campaigns. "Justice for Kemi. I stand with Mama Esther. Dignity for workers." Ordinary citizens stepped forward, sharing their own stories of cruelty from the powerful elite. Mrs. Ajak Silva had become a symbol, no longer of elegance but of pride and arrogance. A name once spoken with admiration was now uttered with scorn, yet she still clung desperately to denial. One evening, after receiving another damaging report, she stormed into her husband's study. "Bidel, you cannot just sit and watch them destroy me. You must act. Call the commissioner, call the president if you must." He lifted his head from his desk, his face etched with concern. "Do something? Joe, did you just say do something?" he repeated slowly. "Joe, I have done everything for you all these years. I covered for you, excused you, and pretended not to notice the tears of those you trampled. But now, I am done." Her voice shook. You can't mean that, Bidel. I am your wife. What do you mean you're done? You can't. You stopped being my wife," he said quietly. "The day you stopped being human." The words hit like thunder. She staggered back, her breathing shallow. For the very first time, Mrs. Ajak Silva felt utterly alone. Then came the final blow. A journalist released documents proving that a portion of the charity funds from her lavish galas, money meant for orphans, had been siphoned into her personal accounts. The internet erupted. "This isn't just greed, it's corruption. She stole from the poor to buy diamonds. Lock her up." Her husband's empire teetered on collapse. Shares crashed, contracts dissolved, and whispers spread that even the government was preparing a formal investigation into the Silva family fortune. My dear people, wealth can buy cars, mansions, and jewels, but it cannot purchase peace, it cannot buy loyalty, and it cannot silence justice forever. Mrs. Ajak Silva once believed herself untouchable, but now, stripped of protection and stripped of pride, she stood before the world, bare in disgrace. The palace had not yet completely fallen, but the cracks were too deep to conceal. Alone in her dim room, beneath a chandelier that no longer sparkled, she sat in silence, staring at a reflection she barely recognized. The billionaire's wife had built a kingdom where only she mattered. Now, she was about to step into a world where nothing she owned mattered at all. The palace was turning into a prison. This was not the end, it was only the reckoning. And if you think Mrs. Ajak Silva had already faced humiliation, you are mistaken. What she endured was merely a scratch compared to the storm awaiting her. For when a woman builds her throne upon the tears of others, it is only a matter of time before those tears rise like a flood and wash everything away. For years, Mrs. Silva believed she was invincible. Her friends hailed her as the queen of Lagos highlife. But now, those same friends had become her judges. Rumors of missing salaries, whispers about abandoned staff, and the tragic story of her sick driver who was left without help. These became fuel for gossip blogs. Photos of her once dazzling gowns and diamonds turned into mocking memes, branded with captions like "the wicked billionaire's wife." And then, the most devastating betrayal came. The full expose was not from an enemy, but from a close confidant, a woman who once begged to join her inner circle. This so-called friend released damning voice notes, hidden recordings, and leaked messages that revealed Mrs. Silva's cruelty. The evidence was undeniable. Her mask was gone. Inside their mansion, the atmosphere grew heavy. For the first time in years, Chief Bamidele Silva addressed her by her full name, without tenderness. "Ajak, what have you done? Do you realize what this means for my business? For our family name?" Defensively, she snapped back. "Don't you dare blame me, Amile. They're just jealous, can't you see? They want to destroy me." Her husband's voice rose. "Jealous? Did you just say jealous? No ad. They are shining light on the darkness you've been hiding. I warned you. And now see what you've caused." The husband who once defended her was now her accuser. But this was just the beginning. The government stepped in. Investigations reopened into her foundation's finances. Donations that never reached orphanages, receipts that didn't add up, testimonies of people left without help, all surfaced. The scandal exploded nationwide. Neighbors who once smiled politely now crossed the street when she appeared. Market women gossiped loudly when her driver parked nearby. Even her closest friends, the ones who had borrowed her jewelry and dined at her table, deleted her number and blocked her on WhatsApp. Then came the day of her greatest public humiliation. She was invited to a charity gala. Hoping to prove she was still respected, she dressed in her finest, a shimmering blue gown, her head tie stacked like a crown. She entered with her usual air of superiority. But no applause followed. No greetings. Instead, the MC cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, in light of recent investigations, our committee has decided to remove Mrs. Ajak Silva as patron of this organization. We do not stand for cruelty, corruption, or abuse. Gasps filled the hall. Cameras flashed. The once celebrated wife of a billionaire was escorted out like a criminal. Within minutes, her humiliated face flooded social media. Back home, her mansion became a cage. Her husband retreated to another wing of the house. Her children, ashamed of the taunts at school, began to avoid her. For the first time, Mrs. Silva sat alone in her gilded living room, staring at the mirror. The woman staring back was not the Queen of Lagos. No, it was a broken shadow, imprisoned by her own pride. At night, the cries of those she wronged echoed in her ears. She remembered the trembling gardener she dismissed, the driver who died without aid, the maid who worked like a slave. For the first time, tears streamed down her face. "Is this what I deserve?" she whispered. "After all I built, after all I sacrificed, is this what I deserve?" But the truth is, what she called sacrifice was oppression. And what she called building was built upon people's pain. So the billionaire's wife, once feared and envied, now sat stripped of her power and dignity, waiting for karma's final strike. But here lies the suspense. Was this truly the end of her downfall? Or was fate preparing something even more devastating? Something that would not only humble her, but force her to beg the very people she once despised. You thought Mrs. Ajak Silva's shame had peaked. You thought being expelled from a gala and abandoned by her husband was the worst. No. Everything so far was just the drumroll. The prelude to a collapse that could shatter an empire overnight. Dear listener, I know you cannot wait to discover what became of Mrs. Ajak Silva. And I know you want to see if the wicked billionaire will finally pay for her sins. That, my friends, will be revealed in part 2. So like this story, share it with your loved ones. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do so. You won't want to miss what comes next. Until my next tale, be kind to yourself, stay safe, and stay blessed.